Ferorius, how you doing, bro? why are you why are you consistently over on Kick instead of on Twitch? Do you just prefer Kick, or is it just because there needs to be some kind of moderation over there? And there we go. I think that works. Where am I? Yeah, I know where I am. I'm not sure what I want to do here. Oh yeah, I remember now. Some kind of moderation. Plus, when I watch you on Twitch on the phone, I get hiccups. Wait, so Kick is better on the phone? How the fuck does that work, bro? That is actually surprising. They're not gonna lie. That is actually surprising. I did not think Kick would be better than Twitch, but the Twitch's mobile is shit. I don't know why. I don't know why Twitch struggles so much with mobile. Like, I don't know what's going on there. I need to do something. Bugger Games, how you doing, brother? Dudes, the mines are closed. Why are you guys here? You have the day off. You can literally do anything, and yet you're in the mines. I'm just putting in a little bit of overtime. Let me just show you what I'm busy with, so you guys don't think I'm just fucking ignoring you for no reason. Dave, how you doing, brother? I'm a dwarf. I live in the mines. Sup? Sup, bro? Please, can you load in? Like, how long are you gonna take to load in now? I would really love to edit you, bro. Like, seriously. I'd like to take a scalpel to you. Ah, man. Vamir, how you doing, brother? What's the plan? The plan is to have coffee and to hang out. That's the plan. Maybe play some Ixion. I don't know yet. I wasn't supposed to stream today, but I'm bored. So I decided, fuck it, why not? Let's go live. Let's see what happens on this side of the internet on a Saturday. Because the LEC starts in about an hour and a half, which is something that I can watch. But I don't know what to do with myself for the next hour and a half thing. I mean, I can always watch the LEC later, so it doesn't really make sense for me not to go live now. I don't even know how long we're gonna be live for. This is purely an impromptu shift within the mines. And also, like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. How am I supposed to cut any of this if it won't even load? Now we'll give it a bit. We'll give it a bit. We'll come back to this. We'll come back to this when it's finally decided that it's time to... Oh, there we go. It's decided that it's time to load. Z-Vengeance, how you doing, brother? Okay, now we need to see when. Fuck, this is like Sophie's Choice. Stable. It looks good at the moment. Shit, I was kind of planning on having 10 more minutes to set up. And just... Moni, how you doing, brother? Yeah, I was lying, but look at the title, bro. The mine is closed on weekends. The fact that you guys are here just suggests that you guys are like me, workaholics. And even when the mine is closed, you're still showing up, right? I'm just here because I have no fucking life. So may as well be here. Like, what else am I going to do? Just fix everything and make sure everything's in the right place? But oh well. As you can see here, we're supposed to only go live in about a minute. I just take it personally and assume you were like, we're waiting for Vengeance to show up. Rustic, how you doing, brother? Are we waiting for silver, copper, or some hot babes? I mean, I could do some hot babe mining. Who are we mining, though? A wild war question. I want your opinion on time magic. Why is there not an army of Murazons from all the different infinite timelines like Rick and Morty? Bah, you see, this is the problem with time travel. This is why you, generally speaking, do not wish to, like, you don't want to do too much time nonsense because you end up with a lot of contradictions whenever it comes to time magic. Avedon, how you doing, bro? And Robotic Unicorn, 30 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You end up with a lot of discrepancies that you simply can't fill in. There's like no way for you to keep track of all of the different things that have to be there. So, for example, we know for a fact that there are different versions of Nosdormu, right? We know that because, well, we've seen it. We've seen different versions of Nosdormu. So the fact that Nosdormu is going around the timeline, screwing around with things in the timeline, suggests that there must be other Nosdormus doing the exact same thing, although for the interests of the story, that is rarely, if ever, just like revealed, right? So basically, for the interest of the story, there is just the one Nosdormu. Even though that makes no logical sense. There's no logical way that there is only one Nosdormu. The only thing that we sort of know that doesn't exist in every single one of the timelines are the Titans and most likely, beings on the level of the Titans. Apparently just exist on the singular timeline and they can visit other timelines, but there are no other versions like them within the timeline. And then the one other thing that we know of that spans literally the whole of the timeline is the Well of Eternity, because the Well of Eternity literally broke through. It literally caused a rift within the timelines when it happened. So all of the timelines have that hole inside of it, right? To some extent. But it is, it's sort of like it's this weird paradoxical thing that's created with time travel, specifically in movies and games. When you open that Pandora's box, you do run into sort of, you require the audience to suspend a lot of belief. Because even though things obviously has to be one way, it can't be that way, and therefore now everyone just needs to believe that this other version of events is true. So yeah, I would argue that. Like, I don't think we are the one true timeline. I'm starting to think that all the timelines are just as valid. It's not the okay. So the one true timeline only comes from Amanthul. Lenlei, how you doing? Only Amanthul has ever believed in such a thing as the one true timeline, and he's the one that also stated it. As far as we know, none of the other entities within World of Warcraft believe in such a thing as the one true timeline. That is just a pure sort of invention by the Titans. All of the others, so for example, the old gods do not for a second believe in a one true timeline. In fact, they literally canonically reject the idea that there is just one true timeline. Minute. So okay. I think that works. Let's go full screen. Now I wonder if I can set this up. What's Hollow Face? It's possible. Is there a way to set up a redirect? Let's see. It has to be working.
When do I start the show?
Nope. Can't do that. All right, never mind. Never mind. Okay. Focus discussion for this. All right. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I apparently start the show there. But that's not exactly what I wanted to do. Oh, mother of... Where did this happen again? Oh, man, now I have to check again. Focus discussion for this. All right. Okay, I know now. So we want to be 14 minutes, 13 seconds. Right about there, right? Ladies and gentlemen, there we go. That's good. Okay. I think we can do it this way. Hello, Face is a VTuber Expo, kind of like BlizzCon. All right. Today is the first day of the VTuber agency Hollow Live. They have annual event, and it's like, fuck me. There's an actual VTuber event. Okay. I mean, I guess there's streamer events, so I guess that makes sense. Now, Gamergate. How many months ago was it that the first signs of the failings of Twitch reared their heads? They are not incongruent, in my opinion, and happening also with movies in Hollywood. Is this a campaign to dumb down quality? I mean, wait, what do you mean? Howard, what do you mean? No, I mean, it's fine. I'm just not entirely sure, like, what is it that you're asserting? Yeah, okay. You're connecting dots, but like, what is the overall argument that you're trying to make? Are you trying to say that Gamergate is about the developers trying to dumb down media? I don't know what that word means, Howard. Ascertaining the campaign? What does that mean? Danny, how you doing? Of movies, Twitch, and gaming, plus everything in media. So, the thing with Gamergate that I think a lot of people completely misconstrued when it comes to Gamergate is that a lot of people, again, suffer from incredibly simplistic thinking. So they hear one thing and they latch onto that one thing. And then suddenly Gamergate becomes just about that one thing, right? So Gamergate now, to some people, is all about the dumbing down of writing. To other people, it's all about DEI. For some people, it's all about racism. For some people, it's all about this, all about that. But what no one understands is that the whole Gamergate movement, and partly because a lot of people, and I don't take this, I don't blame people for this, but human beings have a very hard time understanding the full contextual ideas behind things. So very few people have the ability to look at a problem and recognize that the problem has a lot of context and also there's a fullness to it, right? So there's a lot of different elements to a specific problem. And now that entire problem becomes Gamergate, but Gamergate isn't just one thing. It's not just a single thing that exists and you can go, yeah, that's what it is. So for most people, what they will do is the thing that is most notable to them, that's what Gamergate will become. So Gamergate for some people will be about wokeness introduced into their video games. Why? Because it's the most notable thing for them. When they're playing a game and they view woke politics in their game, it's like, yep, that's what it is. Okay? For some people, it will be all about the different races of characters because that's the thing that's most notable to them. And so that is what it becomes. But generally speaking, it all stems from a feeling. Since human beings always start from emotion, there's an emotion that happens, and that emotion will then, sort of, will try to make sense of the emotion. And so we extrapolate from the emotion, trying to find the truth of the thing that we're actively talking about, right? So the emotion is, I'm not having fun in modern day video games and in modern day movies and series. I'm not finding enjoyment. Now, I mean, every single one of you have had moments where you sort of ask yourself, am I just getting too old for this? Like, is it just, my brother and I were having this discussion not very long ago, where he said he thinks he's just getting too old for movies. Because movies that he used to enjoy, he used to enjoy certain types of movies, and now when he watches the same kind of movies, he finds very little enjoyment in it. Most of the time, the movies just come across as, really childish and just not very good. Now, again, he spends his time in data analysis doing mathematics and programming. He doesn't give a shit about this stuff, so he's not going to spend a lot of mental resources trying to break this stuff down. Whereas me, this is the kind of stuff that I do. This is the kind of stuff that I love. So I obviously spend all of my mental resources on stuff like this, trying to discern what is this feeling and where does this feeling come from. So fundamentally, what Gamergate is a feeling of I'm no longer having fun in my video games, or at least in most of my video games. That then eventually sets into anger. But to try and understand where that feeling comes from, we have to start extrapolating quite a lot, right? So we have to start connecting a lot of dots. And I think I've connected all of those dots to a single principle, a single driving factor, and that is narcissism. It's the narcissism of developers that has created this entire debacle. So allow me to explain. There's been a ton of tweets by developers that basically their defense of Sweet Baby Inc. and their defense of DEI video games is that, is it really, I actually retweeted this. Let me quickly see if I can find it. Let me just quickly see. Here we go. Anyone consider, this is by Paul, anyone consider that games are made by large teams of diverse people all looking to see themselves in the media we're making? Also, what if DEI isn't an agenda, but a reflection of what's actually happening in the world, the real world outside your window? This is the narcissism that I'm referring to. This is narcissism. In writing, specifically in great writing, the author should never try to create themselves within the world. More often than not, and of course there are always exceptions to this, there are brilliant writers that will write themselves cameos in movies, but then more often than not, it is an obvious cameo, and most of the time it's used to comedic effect. So the cameo will be some kind of comedy, and the audience knows it's almost like on the border of the fourth wall being broken, right? Because I'm writing a cameo of myself into the story. Now, for the most part, great stories have to start from the world that you are creating. So you have a world. This world needs to be informed by the characters, but the characters will also be informed by the world, right? So you write characters for the world, and that makes sense within that world. When you take a game like God of War, for example, Kratos doesn't exist in any other world as a logical a logical extraction from that world, except for the world of God of War. If you try to shoehorn Kratos, for example, into a Lord of the Rings, it simply would not work, because Kratos, his entire personality, his history, his future, the way he makes his decisions, his ideological beliefs are all shaped by the world in which Kratos finds himself, right? But as we've seen, Kratos also impacts the world around him. And that world is very much a give and take between Kratos and the storyteller. But where that story starts is the world. I have an idea for a place, and I have a setting for a story. And then I start asking myself, okay, where do I go with this story, right? What's a character going to look like? What's a normal human going to look like in this universe? What's their lives going to look like? How are their lives going to be impacted by this world? Okay, so it becomes a very sort of careful tightrope of creating the story and making sure that every character is its own thing. That's the most fundamental part of storytelling, and that is ensuring that every character that you write is its own thing. Every character you write has a personality, has dreams, has desires, has goals, has a history, has relationships. What are those relationships? How are those relationships informative to their character, and how do their character impact those relationships? Now, when you have a group of developers, say 10, 15, 16, 20 writers, all trying to see themselves in a video game, you are automatically going to run into trouble, because now you're working in reverse. You are starting by saying, I have a character. I don't just have one, though. I have 20 characters. I now want to create a world where all 20 of these characters can be featured. Well, how's that going to work? Because one world isn't going to create 20 different characters. One world is most likely going to create a single type of character, right? So I'll use a great example of this. Little Mermaid. All right. Now, personally, I don't have much of a problem with Little Mermaid, being race swapped and them using a black girl for Little Mermaid. But when you think about the original story, why is she pale? And why does she have red hair? Because she lived her entire life under the sea, where there's no sun, where there's literally zero reason from an evolutionary perspective for her to have more pigment than what she has, right? Now, she's a mermaid. She's completely made up, so you're allowed to play around with it. But if you are going to write a black girl into it, you have to be careful, because you've now made a fundamental change to this world. How are you going to change your world in order to accommodate the new character that you've just written in here? Because the world has to change. It has to be updated to allow for this character to now exist within it. There's no reason why it can't. You absolutely are allowed to do that. But this is a great example of you literally just saying, well, we're doing it because we want to. Okay, but that's not good storytelling. I understand that you want black girls to watch a movie and enjoy seeing themselves on the screen. I fully understand that. But do you not believe that a more respectful approach would have been to write an actual story where the hero or the heroine is a black girl? Would that not have been far more respectful to the actual audience to do that? Where it all makes sense. So now what ends up happening, more often than not, is you end up with a world that is fractured. The world is sort of all over the place, and most of the story makes little to no sense. So now you get these massive exposition dumps, right? Because you have this massively diverse cast of characters that all seemingly come from the same place, yet how they're that diverse is also never really explained. And now you have these series of completely unbelievable, almost hyper extravagant events that the audience has a very hard time believing. And now you have to exposition dump. You have to use incredibly unnecessary dialogue just to be able to make the audience believe the things that had just occurred. And that is, in its entirety, the reason why people are upset about modern day video games. It is because once you start from the reverse. So once you start from the perspective of, I want to include as many people as possible in my story, you automatically make your story way too convoluted. Your story now requires way too much setup to really operate and work. Right? Now, there are worlds that use this to great effect. Like, for example, Warhammer 40k. How is Warhammer 40k able to do the diversity that they do? They literally use the whole galaxy. The whole galaxy is their playground. And therefore, if they need a character that is dark-skinned, there are planets from which those characters can hail. If they need a character that has blonde hair and blue eyes, there are planets from which those characters can hail. I can basically just invent a planet and then have that planet inform why this person looks and acts the way that they do. And in Warhammer, you oftentimes see that, right? The people that come from certain planets have certain personality types. For example, the Luna Wolves. Their planet very much informs their own personalities. The Ultramarines, their planets very much inform their personalities. So it is important that you keep these things in mind, and that's why it's almost always a good idea to start from the beginning, and that is start at the world. And let the world inform what it is that you want to create here. And then if you do say, I want to have a diverse set of characters, you have to think very carefully about what kind of world are you trying to create here. Because the world needs to make sense. It needs to be logically conclusive. And that will almost always limit the amount of diversity that you can have in the story. Maybe in the DLC, you can have more diversity, because in the DLC, they can go to a different part of the world, and that different part of the world now introduces even more characters to the story. But again, you have to decide how convoluted do you want your story, and then if you are going to do that, you require a super good writer. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying that you can't have a story that is literally the most diverse story in the world. But then you do require phenomenal writers. You need a guy that genuinely, or a girl that genuinely understands how to write this. And I don't believe that any of the writers that come out of universities are anywhere near good enough to actually write the types of worlds that they're looking for. So if you want to break down Gamergate 2.0 into its most core fundamental origins, it's the narcissism of developers. Does that answer the question? I saw someone making a counterpoint. What did I miss? Whose message did I miss? Into a cannon tends to quickly dilute the stakes. I mean, that's also true. Oh, the SpongeBob comment. Yeah, okay, so the SpongeBob comment, again, that's another way of doing it, right? If, for example, you want to have your world not be logically consistent, you make it as unbelievable as possible. That's another way, like hyper, surrealism almost. So you go for super surrealism. You have a sponge that can talk. That can't happen anyway, so you can do literally whatever you want. And that's fine, right? But again, you have to think about the origin story of something. So obviously, The Little Mermaid has an origin story. The person who originally created The Little Mermaid had a reason for creating The Little Mermaid in the way that they did. And so if you do want to make changes to it, you have to be very careful with the changes that you make to ensure that you're making those changes in such a way that it is believable to the character, right? Or to the audience, right? The audience needs to be able to believe this. If the audience can't believe it, we have a problem. Yeah, well, parody is sort of hyper surrealism, right? That is what parody generally is. Now, of course, you can have parody that's hyper realism, but a parody thereof, which is also fine. You can do that, but then again, you're very aware of the fact that you are creating something that is a joke, right? So you're again gonna write it very much like a joke, so that it is sort of absurd. Like it's sort of like absurdist theater. I remember back in college, absurdist theater was very much like this. Everything is written to the utmost absurdity, and it's very obvious to the audience and to the reader that this is absurd, right? But in order to do that, you have to be aware of what you're creating. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Chupacabra, how you doing, bro? I think the problem is just that most people really struggle to understand. I think the reason people struggle to understand it is writing good stories isn't easy, right? Like the art of writing is truly an art. It really is a difficult process. And so for someone that's standing on the outside, the only reason I know the stuff that I do is because I studied it. And also I'm very, very involved in it, right? I love stories. I read a fuck ton. So these are things that I'm very, very interested in. And I like these stories. And I like knowing how stories come together. But the overwhelming majority of people obviously aren't like that. They just want a good story. They just want to enjoy the story. By the way, you will be messing around with the DD2 character creator. Danny, probably not. We'll probably create our Dragon's Dogma character when Dragon's Dogma comes out. Morning, I can read. It just takes a long time. I have to read, and I also move my lips while I read. Look at the this. That's how I read. It takes a while, but I get there. Yeah, I obviously have to use my finger. You have to keep track. How else are you gonna know where you are? I'm gonna just release the video about wokeness in video games. What is your opinion? Then are you asking me? Oh, you're saying Asmongold just released the video. I saw Asmongold's video. I haven't watched the video, but I saw the video pop up in my feed. We can watch that. I'm happy to watch it if you guys want. Next guy, how you doing? Yeah, I mean, I've released a lot of videos about wokeness in video games. So, I think my thoughts on it is pretty well established. But I'm happy to watch Asmongold's video on it if you guys want. Playing Dragon's Dogma 1 again. I haven't played Dragon's Dogma ever before. So, I should probably get into it. But, alright, yeah, we can watch Asmongold's video.
Wokeness in video games. This has been a very popular topic for the past couple of weeks, and let's be honest, it's been a popular topic for the last decade. And today, I want to talk about why it's a popular topic, and what I think that concern actually indicates for a larger relationship that developers have with players. And I think that's really where the problem lies. I think that the issue that people have with wokeness is actually not the disease, it is just merely a symptom of the disease, and the actual disease is that players here in the West no longer trust development studios to make games that are authentic to a vision, that are authentic to an artistic expression, and that are authentic to a customer in a way that it's not manipulative, predatory, or obnoxious in some form of way. And I think that this is a fundamental problem that goes right down to the DNA of the...
To be fair, though, the problem was started by developers. They were the ones who declared us, the gamers, the enemy. And you can see it now. You can see it with this whole Gamergate thing. The Gamergate thing starts with a player being attacked by developers. It's a developer that attacks the player. The player claps back, as well as a bunch of the other players going, what the hell, right, just happened here? And then suddenly, all of the developers and all of the journalists blame the players. Like, they literally say, we started it, but we didn't start it. We didn't start it. It was one guy that made a group on Steam simply highlighting all of the games that Sweet Baby Inc. had worked on. And it's information that he got from their website, because it's on their website, the games that they worked on. He simply didn't like the games that Sweet Baby Inc. had worked on, and he decided to start a curator group. Literally, the reason those groups exist is so that people who join that group have a curated experience. But the gamers are the ones that gets blamed for this. And then you have developers literally throughout this entire thing saying how the gamers need to shut the fuck up and that we aren't making games for you. You don't need to play our games. Leave us alone, right? So clearly we are their enemies and they were the ones who started it. Now they're in a position where the overwhelming majority of video gamers no longer trust them and no longer view them as ours. You know, it used to be that developers were also gamers. We loved our developers because they were like us. They were gamers. That is no longer the case. Developers are now hoi polloi, part of the, part of the 1% almost. At least they don't make that much money, but they do pretend like they're upper class, looking down at all us lowly peasants, from up high in their glass fucking castles. Now, here's the problem that I have fundamentally with games developers, and you'll hear this quite often on Twitter if you follow me or literally follow any of the shenanigans. The game developers will go, I'm so sick and tired of gamers making up their minds and jumping to conclusions when they don't have a clue what goes into making a video game, just how hard a video game actually is. And it's like, bitch, please, you're not a rocket scientist. Your job is not hard. You want to know how I know your job isn't hard? Because there are award-winning indie video games that were developed and made by a single dude. That's how I know it's not hard. It is the easiest job in the world. The only reason you're pretending that it's hard is because you went to university. You spent a boatload of money getting a degree that is completely and utterly useless, because in order to make video games, you don't need a degree. How do we know this? Palworld is one of the fastest selling games this year, and probably in years. This game broke records with its sales. 3 of the developers that worked on that game had no idea how to make video games. They've never made video games in their entire lives. They didn't study for it. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. They simply just figured it out. It's bullshit. Are there elements of video games and making those video games that are hard? Sure, but the average developer has nothing to do with those elements. So, for example, Mr. Bongi, engine development. Engine development is an actual difficult thing to do because you need an actual engine engineer that understands how to create and design an engine, right? Because that's super hard coding. Once you have the engine, most of it is just plug and play. And most developers, when they don't know what the hell's going on, they'll go to the actual engine engineers and they'll be like, I don't know what's going on. How do I fix this? And then the actual dude that needed a degree just fixes it for them. So it's bullshit, it's nonsense. And it just further creates this divide between the average player base and these developers because they pretend like they're more important than what they are, when the reality is the exact opposite of that.
Way that people view Western development studios. And it is a multifaceted issue, like, as I said, with monetization, with political themes, with the way that games are released, with bugs in games, etc. All of these things, I think that a lot of people in the West have completely lost trust in development studios, Western development studios, to accurately fulfill their needs as players and, more importantly, fulfill their needs as customers. And we're going to contrast that with a lot of times.
I mean, let's be honest. How many times does it happen nowadays that you see a phenomenal trailer for a video game and your first thought is, let's wait and see? You're a liar if you say not every time. Because it is every time. Every single time we watch a trailer on this stream, all of you in chat go, it looks amazing, but we'll see. Because we have no trust left in these people. We've been lied to so many times that it's just simply a case of, yeah, this is probably just, good marketing. The game's likely gonna suck. Or you have people going, well, yeah, what's the in-game store gonna look like? It looks good, but how's my game gonna be monetized up my asshole? Right? And out my throat. That's how people feel now?
Whenever Eastern studios do almost the exact same thing, and there's no problem about it at all. Which is what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about where I think this kind of comes from and why I think people have as much of a problem with it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is monetization, because monetization is one of those, it's something that obviously everybody thinks about, but it might not really, people might not really make the connection, monetization and wokeness in video games, but fundamentally, these are just two different ways that people are communicating that they have a distrust for the developer or the publisher of a video game. So whenever, for example, a Western video game has a battle pass, whenever it has any sort of other, pay to win features or something like that, people might get very frustrated or very annoyed with that. And I think it's very fair to do that, but I also think that that frustration is very much subdued compared to people being frustrated or annoyed with development studios doing that are Eastern. For example, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, etc. So I'll give you a really good example. It's one that's actually going on right now, is Dragon's Dogma 2. Dragon's Dogma 2 has a pre-order, and if you buy the pre-order, you're able to get a number of bonuses and free little cool items. And, I think there's like a ring that you get that makes your character it's kind of like one of those almost autoplay type rings in Final Fantasy 16. And I'm not sure exactly the details on it, but it is a ring that will give you an advantage in the game, at least to some degree or to some extent. And this has been met with literally basically zero pushback. Nobody really...
Well, yeah, because we trust the Eastern developers to make good games. We understand that in the East, they tend to monetize their games up the wazoo, right? But those games are usually phenomenal. And so we go, well, you've earned the right to monetize your game. You've earned that right. So, yeah, forge right ahead and do your thing. The problem is when you make a subpar video game and then you try to monetize it up the wazoo. That's when players go, because remember, for a player, if the game is amazing and it blows my dick off, I know that most of your resources went into making my gaming experience as good as it possibly can be. And then all of the monetization stuff feels to me like it was an afterthought to you, so it is an afterthought to me. However, when I play your game and it is an absolute limp dick experience, I genuinely don't even get a semi while playing your game, but it's monetized up the wazoo. I get the sense that most of your effort went into monetizing the game and very little effort was actually spent on making a good game. A game that comes to mind here, Diablo 4. Diablo 4 launches in an absolutely abysmal state. You know what is absolutely pristine? It's Cash Shop. I mean, the cash shop is filled with literally everything you can imagine. So much content in the cash shop, but the game itself is just empty. It's boring. No one knows what the hell's going on. It's one of the worst experiences in a Diablo game yet. And yet it's monetized. So you can clearly see a lot of effort went into the monetization of that game, and not a lot of effort went into actually making a good game. Right? Yeah, it's a cash shop with a game attached. Pretty much exactly that.
Cares about this. Why would people care about it? Because they're excited for the game and they're very happy about it. However, I do think that if an American studio did something that was similar to that, you can look at, for example, Diablo 4 and surveys that they've put out and how much people have mauled it at Diablo 4, floating the idea that they're going to have anything that even remotely resembles anything like a pre-order bonus. People lost their minds over 3-day early access. So whenever you get something that actually makes your character more powerful, imagine how upset they would be. Now, I understand Diablo is a multiplayer game, and
but I mean, the principle stands.
But I actually don't think it's that big of a difference. I think that the meme of, for example, Ubisoft games having DLC on day one for single-player games, and then also these issues with...
A great example would be Helldivers 2. I just recently read an article where the player base is defending Helldivers 2 because they just added some kind of weapon pack or something into the game that actually does make your character super, super strong. Now, while Helldivers 2 is actually more of a single-player co-op experience, so it's not a multiplayer PvP type of game, it is still an online game, and people tend to get really frustrated in online games when you do provide people with actual power that they can purchase on the store. But for some reason, I don't know why, the player base doesn't seem to mind. Like, most of the players are like, yeah, well, this isn't pay to win, it's fine. Well, I know exactly why, actually. I was just being facetious and, you know, also sort of holding out for content. The reason most players don't give a shit about that is because the game is good. The game is super fun. And once your game is super fun, I want you to be able to monetize it. Like, don't for a second think I'm a greedy little fuck that want you to live in a tent and not eat. I want you to make money. I want you to make as much money as you possibly can. But then you must provide me with one hell of a playing experience. I want to have fun. Once I have fun, yeah, make your money, bro. Like, get that back, by all means. Because the premium currency can be gotten in the game too. Captain Ivan, yeah, of course, right? So there's obviously all sorts of things, but generally speaking, when you sell power on a store in a game that isn't just purely single player, players tend to lose their minds regardless of whether or not you can actually get the currency in the game, right? That doesn't really matter. But the reason players aren't doing it here is because they're already having the time of their lives. So if someone spends a little bit extra money and gets a weapon that's a little bit more powerful or an armor that's a little bit more powerful, no one really gives a shit, right? Because I'm already having fun. I don't have all these massive complaints and the game is half broken and now you're releasing stuff. Take Diablo 4. Once again, I know we're harping on Diablo 4, but it is one of the games that did this most egregiously. But Diablo 4, in the middle of people complaining that there's barely anything to do, the seasons absolutely suck, the gameplay sucks, nothing is fun, what does Diablo 2 do? They launch a $70 mount. Let's take Shadowlands. There's a 9-month content drought during Shadowlands. 9 months. You know what wasn't in drought at all during those 9 months? 6-month shop mounts. 2. There were 2 6-month shop mounts during the 9-month period. 2. That shit is enough to drive players up the fucking wall. Because you're not giving me any new content for 9 months, but you have the guile to shoehorn a mount into a 6-month sub? A 6-month sub that you know for the next 9 months you're not going to be providing me with any content? That's when players lose their minds. That's when you become an actual literal scumbag.
With other games that they have as well, with you know, paid advantages and, you know, like convenience items, even in single player games. This is something that is actually multifaceted. This is something that's happening for multiple games in the West, And the same energy and the same frustration is not being put on developers in the East. And I think the reason why, I think there's a number of different reasons. Number one, I think one of the big reasons is that there is a language barrier. And so a lot of people don't necessarily voice their concerns or voice their complaints against the developers because they assume the developers won't understand them because they're Japanese or Chinese or something.
Avedon, what you are explaining now in Z Vengeance, that's absolutely true. But Avedon, what you're explaining now, that literally forms part of that argument, right? It's the fact that you spent so much time figuring out how to monetize my game that you spent almost no time figuring out how to just make my game fun. You were way too involved in the monetization of my game to even care about fixing or making sure that the game is playable at launch.
So it's going to be hard for them to communicate with the developer. And so that's number one. And I think number two is that this goes into a grander problem where people have a distrust for American corporations. And so the gaming community exists inside of the American gaming community, and the Western gaming community exists inside of a culture that is increasingly more skeptical about.
Is Ubisoft American? I always thought Ubisoft is either French Canadian, or some shit like that. I don't think Ubisoft is American. Is it? It's French, yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely not about just American or distrust in American corporations. Yes, a lot of the corporations that we distrust are American or happen to be American, but it is more a Western thing. It's more a case of we do not trust Western studios because Western studios have basically become just massive scumbags. Pax, how you doing? Ricky, how you doing, bro? I think he's using American interchangeably with Western. I'm hoping that that's what he's doing. I'm not correcting him, just sort of nitpicking.
Capitalism. And I think also for, in some cases, very good reasons. So, for example, whenever you hear about these quarterly profits that happen on a very regular basis, and then you hear that 800 people get fired from a studio, you know, you put two and two together there, and it seems like somebody's a piece of shit, doesn't it? So what ends up happening is that people see these things happen in these Western development studios, and they're basically seeing record profits, everything's going great, and they're also seeing the employees being worked to the bone, being fired, being replaced by AI, and...
I'm going to be honest with you, after being on X-Chat is weird. Justin, what's the question about? I'm going to be honest with you guys. After this most recent bout of Gamergate, I don't much care about the layoffs anymore. In fact, I've become so jaded with the incredible arrogance and the vileness of developers in the Western world that them getting fired, I struggle to believe that it was not justified. And I know that's not the case, right? I know I shouldn't feel that way because I'm pretty sure that there are a ton of developers that do lose their jobs that don't deserve it at all, right? I know that. I know that there are people who have nothing to do with the video game design, like the QA testers. They're not the ones making these decisions, but they're getting laid off, right? They're actually the ones that's trying to make our games good, or make sure that the games are at least playable, right? So I fully understand that, and that's why I will always be anti the layoffs. But there is that part of me that looks at the conduct and the absolute vileness of these developers and just go, you know what? I think you guys fucking deserve it. It's fine, right? But I hope you lose your job because you're a vile piece of shit. You're making my games worse, and then when I complain, you call me a racist and a bigot for complaining about you making my games worse. When the complaint isn't even about race or anything of that nature. The complaint is literally about gameplay being shit. I'm being called all sorts of names. I mean, you can't help, right, but get a little bit jaded as a result of it. It's very difficult not to get jaded over that shit. Now, again, I always recognize when my own biases get in the way, and I always recognize when I shouldn't let my emotions make the decisions on my behalf. So when I see layoffs, I still speak out against it. I will always call out the companies that are doing these layoffs, because I know that, let's say they fire 800 people, there's a good chance that 600 of that 800 are perfectly brilliant, normal, awesome developers that really just want to make video games. But they're so, like, it's so difficult when you deal with, because I'm completely engrossed in this. I don't know if you guys have seen, but if you're following me over on Twitter, I have literally just been hopped up on this entire, like, Gamergate thing. I am involved in everything, right? So I see all of their tweets. I see their vileness. I argue with them and debate with them on Twitter the whole time. And it's so difficult to break away from that. Like, really so difficult to break away from that. Even in a socialist society, they will lose their stand. No one like douchebags. Douchebags with power is even more loathsome. True. That's a stretch for it to be them all. Katie the Mage, I literally just explained how my mindset works around that. What is the waste? Wait, what is the waste if not the global American empire? I guess that is actually true, right? Can confirm every Echo post in the last 2 weeks have been Gamergate 2. Yep. I feel like even if there's a large portion of game devs who are anti-gamer, I don't want the other employees to suffer, but those in charge will not permit it. There's no good solution. Industry can collapse. Good luck to new indie projects. I do think at this rate, the industry is going to collapse, because no industry has ever survived where the people making the product openly and actively loathes the people who consume the product, right? Not good to lose levels on the keys, but I think it's an okay system, because when you don't complete the key, well, when it goes to the Mythic Plus updates, Justin, yeah, you're welcome to make your point, bro. But on this one, like, let's leave it till after this react, and then I'll respond to that, right? I'll respond to you and I'll explain to you why I would never agree with you on that.
And just everything in between, and or you know, like one of the multiple sexual abuse scandals, whether it's Riot, you know, Ubisoft, Blizzard, of course, Activision. One of these things is happening also. And so what ends up happening is that people just have a growing distrust for these corporations, and because they have a distrust for the corporations, fundamentally that distrust comes from a foundation of the companies trying to put profit above everything else. So then whenever that distrust is manifested and you have, oh wow, it's another battle pass that expires, oh boy, now you've got to play the video game 20 hours a week. So people immediately have that frustration because they're looking at it from the context of American culture. And I think that, you know, if you compare it to, for example, you know, the Japanese culture, at least it seems to be at least a little bit different. Because, for example, you know, Iwata, who is one of the Nintendo guys, Satoru, I believe Iwata, cut his salary.
Yeah, he cut it by like 50% in order to... when the company was struggling. I remember this.
As one of the executives at Nintendo, whenever the Wii U did not sell well. I don't remember a Western or especially an American game studio ever doing that.
Would never. What are you? What? Maybe like on April Fools, there may have been an article or two about like Bobby Kotick slashing. No chance, bro. There's no way that a Western dev or a Western executive slashing his pay, like, that would be rich. That would be funny as shit. Ferorius, how you doing, bro? 57 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you. Thank you. Like, here's the only way a Western developer would actually slash their pay. When they were supposed to get 200 million, but then they got a raise that would make it 400 million, and they decided to slash it in, you know, to stand with the developers from 400 million to 300 million. So they've slashed their raise from 200 million to 100 million. That's the only way you will ever find a Western developer slashing their pay. I'll be getting my pay. My employees will pay off the difference over the next year. True. Close example of that would be Keanu Reeves giving his Matrix money to the stunt team instead. Yeah, but Keanu Reeves is just like what the fuck, bro? Bison, how you doing, bro? Like Windows? What do you mean?
So what the issue is that whenever you have an Eastern developer, people have the perception that the Eastern developer owns their failures and also owns their successes. But whenever you have a Western developer, the Western developer seemingly, owns their successes and makes you fund their failures by making you buy battle passes or $70 horse packages in Diablo 4. So that's what ends up happening. So people are distrusting.
Real Gypso, I don't believe. So firstly, Bison, I may not be in on the joke, but I'm not entirely sure what Windows millions mean or whatever, right? I'm assuming you're making fun of the way I say millions, because apparently I say it weird. Although I think I say it normally, but never mind. I don't want executives to cut their pay. I don't. If your company is making hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, dude, that's fine. Like, shit, get the bag, fam. You're running a very good company and your customers are also happy. But I don't give a shit, right? So, for example, I have never complained about Phil Spencer's salary. I don't give a shit about how much money Phil Spencer makes, and I can guarantee you Phil Spencer makes a ton of money. Why do I not care about the money that Phil Spencer makes? Because he offers me Game Pass. For $15 a month, I have access to over 200 games a month. Not sponsored, by the way. I love that. It's a great service. It makes me happy. In that case, get the bag, fam. Like, I don't care how much money you make. As long as I'm happy with the product that you're providing me, I couldn't give two shits. But when you're Bobby Kotick and every single game under you is an absolute dumpster fire because your greed is literally prevalent in every single one of our video games, and then you also get a salary of $200 million a year, that is a problem. That's when I have a problem with it. Outside of that, I couldn't care less.
Trustful from these companies on a foundational level in terms of the way that they monetize, and that distrust comes from a greater distrust in companies inside of American culture, and of course gaming companies are indeed companies. So people don't trust companies, they don't trust gaming companies, and then they see this monetization in the games. They see Bobby Kotick gets $200 million for selling his company amidst a sexual abuse scandal, and people are like, well, this company is a piece of shit. And I think it's pretty fair for somebody to think that, even though obviously I'm sure there's plenty of people that work there that are not, in fact, pieces of shit. So that's one of the first things that I wanted to talk about, and it's the first kind of manifestation of this distrust. And the second thing that I want to talk about after this is actually bugs in games. Now, this is a very small thing, but I do want to talk about it. Final Fantasy 16 originally said that they were going to have a they were going to have a game release with no day one patch. They were not going to need a day one patch. And whenever it came out, and still to this day, that is a very, very big surprise. It's almost unheard of. And you're right, it was, because they needed a day one patch. Does anybody really care about that, though? People are happy that this happened, and people always talk about day one patches and how shoddy things are.
Look, I'll be honest with you, the whole day one patch, specifically for PC games, that is just, like, if people are angry that a game on PC specifically, I know Final Fantasy 16 didn't launch on PC, but for specifically games on PC, if you think that it's possible for a developer to launch a game on PC with 0 bugs, you clearly do not understand how engines operate, and I do not blame you. Engines are actually difficult to understand. But, I mean, there's so many different models, so many different types and components within PCs. Even within RAM, you have different types of RAM, different speeds of RAM, different capacities of RAM, different timings of the same capacities of RAM. So you can have a 64 gig RAM stick, right? Or two 32 gig RAM sticks. That's going to make a difference whether you have 2 or 1. Because the engine needs to know that you have 2 sticks so it can utilize, or 1. It needs to know that shit. But then the timing is also going to come in. Do you have CL32? Do you have CL14? Do you have CL15? CL16? CL40? All of this is going to is going to matter. Do you use 2-channel, 4-channel, right? These things are going to matter. From your CPU, how fast is your CPU? Do you have a faster CPU than what it says on the box? Do you have a slower CPU than what it says on the box? Are you overclocking? Are you not overclocking? How much voltage is going on? What kind of motherboard do you have? How is the motherboard operating? What kind of hard drive do you have? How is the hard drive operating? Right? So when you start to put all of this together, that is something that the engine has to consistently be updated for, and it needs to be able to work with it. And it's going to change from game to game because every game is going to utilize those resources very, very differently. And of course, as we're getting into the AI space now with stuff like RTX, and also with, I can't remember what the technology is called, but where it actually has a straight access to the SSD drive. The graphics card has straight access to the SSD drive. That becomes an extra factor, more technicalities that now have to be introduced to it. So in PC games, you're never going to get a game that launches with 0 bugs on PC. That's just impossible to have. Consoles, you could probably, but even there may be differences because not all consoles are created equal, sadly, because again, you're sort of playing the silicon lottery, right? So even though you have 2 Xboxes, one may be performing slightly different than the other one, and that could have an effect on how the game actually plays out. So yeah, I don't think people give a shit about bugs. Sorry, that was a massive tangent. Alastor, how you doing, bro?
For American companies, but whenever, for example, Endwalker had problems with Final Fantasy XIV, the community of the game understood that this was because of a microchip shortage and because that, COVID at the time was kind of still a pretty big deal at the point, especially in Japan, apparently, from what I've heard. And so, because of that, people were more understanding of what the issue was. But whenever an American company has servers that go down for, let's say, a day or two, people lose their fucking minds. And again...
But again, this is understandable. We've had this conversation before, so I'll do a quick recap. I won't get the paint out for this one. Every single gaming company have 2 bank accounts. The one is the bank account that none of us gives a shit about, because as long as it's full, it means they're making more video games. The other is what we call the bank account, or the bank of goodwill, or the bank of player goodwill. As long as that bank is full, you are allowed to make mistakes, and the players will forgive those mistakes because every single mistake you make is simply withdrawing money from the bank of goodwill. The players offer a little bit of their goodwill up because they trust you to make a really good product, because you've made really good products in the past and you've never actually let them down. All of the Western developers have completely spent their goodwill. Blizzard was probably the last Western developer to spend their goodwill. They are all now broke. That bank account is basically closed. None of them deposit almost anything into that bank account. So now, whenever something does happen, you're taking it right on the dick, right? Because there is no buffer. There's no goodwill left. So I don't trust you already. Now you fail. Now you just prove to me how big of a piece of shit you are. Rather than, oh, wow, this is a small mistake. We can forgive this. Again, it's developers brought this on themselves.
And I think that another big component to this, and I want to repeat this, is that people feel like that they will be able to communicate with the developers and communicate with the company directly. It's very hard to communicate with Nintendo. I've watched enough Smash Brothers to know that very, very well. So I think that that's also a component to it, but there's also a component of feeling like the developers at least care about the artistic integrity of the work. So whenever there is a bug or there is a problem with the game, it is assumed that this will be fixed quickly and that it will be dealt with. Whereas whenever an American company does this, I think that there is a different perception that people have with it. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is, I guess, the elephant in the room, which is the main topic of the video, is the wokeness in video games and the political messaging in video games. Mm-hmm. So basically, I think that there are a lot of Eastern developers that do representation in a lot of the same ways that American companies do representation. And I'll use, for example, Final Fantasy XVI. Dion, as a character, was gay. Pretty simple. You play the game, you're going to know that. He's a gay dude, or at least bisexual. And because of that, this is a plot device in the story, and it is not, it's not super, it's not like if you took this out of the story, like nothing in the story would work, but it does have relevance and importance in the story. It's not like it's a throwaway scene that's just meant to be, you know, throwing a bone to the, you know,
to the gay community. He's not a token, in other words. What have I said since day one? Make your character gay, but then make that matter. Make it so that there is a reason why this character is gay, and not just, oh, look, our character is gay. Like, a good example here would be Soldier 76, or Tracer from Overwatch. Tracer and Soldier 76 are gay characters for no other reason than being gay. Like, legit, there is zero other reason for them being gay. Like, it doesn't explain any of their abilities. It doesn't explain anything, really, because the only thing they do is shoot people. There is no gameplay there where that is informed. Soldier 76 doesn't run like a super camp fucking flaming dude, right? If Soldier 76 had a camp running animation and then they made him gay, you may actually argue, well, that's just them explaining why he runs camp, right? But he doesn't do that. He's like the super hard soldier dude. Why does it matter what his sexuality is? Because it doesn't change anything within the game, right? It doesn't add or take away from it. Like, whether this character is gay, straight, or asexual literally adds nothing to the story outside of you trying to create a tokenized character for tokenized people. Because you don't view gay people as actual people. You don't view them as people worthy of you putting some effort into it. You simply view them as a tick box on a list that you have to tick to say, yep, there we go, we have the gay. Now the gays can shut the fuck up because we have a little tick box for them. And the trans people can shut the fuck up because we have a little tick box for them. Newsflash, you're the bigot. Like, you are the bigot, because for you, these are not people. They're just on a list. They're a name on a list that needs to be ticked off. I don't know, Pringles.
Diversity guys, right? Or diversity dogs. Like, this is just, it felt like it was authentic in a way. And I think that that's really the word that I would want to go back to again, is authenticity. I think that whenever Eastern studios do this, there is a assumption that they are doing it for an artistic intent. And whenever American studios do this, there is an assumption that they are doing it for a more nefarious intent. Whether this is to secure funding through some form of ESG, who knows how true that is necessarily, but this is what people think. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how true it is or not. We're talking about perception, and, you know, truth is not always important in perception. So I don't want to hear about whether this is true or not. I think that there's a lot of people that think this, and if you go on the internet, you will realize that this is indeed the truth to them. And so that's number one. A lot of people think that they're doing it for money. Number two is they're doing it to meet some sort of quota or something like that. And number three, it is developers inserting their personal agenda or their personal politics into the story. Now, I think all three of these things happen in American games. Of course they do.
Well, it's not, I mean, we don't have to guess about this. We don't have to guess. There's no guesswork required. Hold up. Let me just find it for you guys. I just want to be sure everyone understands this. There's no guessing here. On Asmongold's final point, this is literally from a developer. Anyone consider that games are made by large teams of diverse people all looking to see themselves in the media we're making? So, yeah, that's not a guess. That's literally them saying it. That's from their own mouths.
But I also think that they happen in Eastern games as well. Like, for example, I don't know, Metal Gear Solid. So there's a lot of examples of this happening in Eastern games, but they're not met with the same degree of skepticism and criticism. Now, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and Metal Gear Solid, to be completely fair, is actually not the perfect example, because usually people have a problem whenever something is not having this type of messaging, and then it is converted into having the messaging, whereas Metal Gear Solid was, the genesis of Metal Gear Solid was that it was politically themed. So it is slightly different, but it is not entirely different. So what I'm saying is that Why is it that...
Well, I would say, again, when you go into Metal Gear Solid, you are very much aware that Hideo Kojima was creating a piece of political commentary. You were very much playing Hideo Kojima's political message, because that's what he created there. It's also what he creates in all of his games. So when you step into that game, you are very much aware of it. Death Stranding, for example, has incredible political messaging. But again, you understand it. It makes sense. That's literally what it is. That's what he does. It's what he does well. That's why his games almost always play more like movies than what they necessarily just play like games, because he is providing social commentary. And that's perfectly fine if that is what you're going for from the start. The problem is when you're trying to hide it inside just a normal video game. Yeah, he wasn't trying to pretend like this is just a fun little video game, but then also happen to have all of these deeply political themes within it. And if you play the games, he also gives every single one of these political themes a lot of respect, right? He pays a lot of respect to the political themes that he uses in Metal Gear Solid, and even in Death Stranding.
That, for example, whenever Square Enix does this, it is seen as like, Dion is like this awesome, really cool character. People love him. People think he's great. But then whenever an American company adds a character in that is gay or has some other form of, minority status, this is somehow a problem. And I think the reason why is just straight up, people do not trust these companies to deliver an artistic vision that is authentic to what their actual artistic intent is. This is something that's being done for some other intent other than the goal of writing or creating the best story. I think that is the number one reason. And the other reason I think is a little bit more, it's a little bit more nuanced, but I think as soon as you see it, it becomes obvious. So with Final Fantasy XVI, there were countries, I'm not sure exactly how many of them, I know that there was at least one, that would not sell Final Fantasy XVI, and it became relatively evident that the reason probably for that was because of having gay characters in the story. So
I can imagine.
What did Square Enix do?
I don't imagine Saudi Arabia was lining up for Final Fantasy 16. I doubt that they were like, yeah, sure, we treat gay people with respect here.
Do in response to this? Well, they said, fuck you, I guess we're not going to sell it there.
Yeah.
So they actually were willing to lose money for this problem because of what their values were and because of holding on to their artistic integrity. Now, if you contrast this with, for example, Blizzard Entertainment, Blizzard Entertainment loves to parade around the different people, different sexualities of people.
They do. Although, whenever you see Blizzard Entertainment's logos in places like Saudi Arabia, in places like the Middle East, they never have rainbow flags on them. Ever. Blizzard loves to pretend like they give a shit about these characters. But when it comes to China, when it comes to the Middle East, Blizzard removes that shit very quickly. Very, very quickly. To appease them. So clearly, you're not doing it out of principle. You're not doing it because you actually care about these people. You're doing it because you want to make money, and you know that by being woke, you're somehow appeasing the crazy people on Twitter.
The different, like the different races of people, women's diversity, etc., in these different videos that they do, and they like making posts about this, and, basically using these people as marketing tools. But whenever it comes down to it, the Overwatch League, I'm pretty sure, is in Saudi Arabia now. And so isn't that a very interesting situation? Yep. And so whenever I see this kind of stuff happen, you can clearly...
Nani, I don't know about the... World of Warcraft has been removed from China, but not because Blizzard decided to do it, but because China decided not to, continue with it. So I don't know how Dragonflight's story is, but considering the fact that China passed a law about two years ago, I think it was, we covered it, where they made it very clear that you are not allowed to have any sort of gay storylines in video games. Love between men and woman will not be allowed in video games. They have like this entire list of stuff that will not be allowed in video games. I'm almost willing to bet that should Dragonflight release in China, that storyline will be cut from the game, as well as any and all mentions of any characters being gay whatsoever. Like, I'm almost willing to bet that.
Clearly see that this company does not really have any morals or does not really have any ethics or values. And I think that that's what really makes people distrust these American companies, is because whenever these companies have nothing to lose, they have no problem advertising and talking about how much they care about different minorities or protected groups. But the moment that it can actually cause them to lose money, or the moment that these people are actually their employees that need better treatment, somehow this is a lot different. And you have to understand that, global markets and, like cultural relevance and everything like that. And the reality is that, Blizzard has literally no problem literally erasing gay people. Like, I'm sure Soldier 76 and Tracer are probably not gay whenever they do the Overwatch League. They're not communicated in the same way in media.
No, they won't
there
be.
Because of that.
Of course
it's the same
not.
as they are here, because obviously of the culture over there. And these companies are willing to bend the knee to cultures that are, by their own definition of what they stand for, completely antithetical to what their foundational beliefs are.
Fucking
but
true,
it doesn't
bro.
matter to them because they can stand to make money off of it, and so they do it. And I think that this is, and I want to address also another thing, because again, you're seeing these companies that will just do this, and I think also it would be okay if they did this. It's almost like you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can have your cake or you can eat it, but you can't have both. So what ends up happening is that you have these companies that like to, on Pride Month, change all of their stuff to a rainbow. But then the moment that, you look at what is their brand for different areas in the world, well, they didn't change any of these other brands. They're just changing it for more westernized ones. So, and why is that? Well, that's obviously because
bravery isn't standing up in a room where no one will attack you and screaming something. That's not bravery. Bravery would literally be these companies that are apparently so incredibly inclusive and so incredibly diverse refusing to release their games in the Middle East, refusing to release their games in China until China and the Middle East actually open up their countries and open up their societies to people from different sexualities. That would be bravery. Disney, for example. Disney has made every single one of their movies as diverse as humanly possible. Do you guys remember what Disney did with the poster for Star Wars in China? Do you guys remember that? The Star Wars poster in China removed Finn. The black character, the black stormtrooper, was removed. He was made like super small in the China one, because in China, that shit isn't allowed. So now you ask yourself, wait, are you actually diverse? Are you actually for diversity or inclusion? Or are you just for it because you're trying to hit some tokenized, marginalized community? And, you put Finn there because he's a token to that community. And obviously, since in China, that tokenism doesn't work, you're more than willing to remove it. Like, clearly, right? That's not bravery. That's you being a disgusting asshole. Is going to the mushroom. Made the Chinese character center. They fucked that man hard. Dude, his story started out so well, and then just turned into a big fat nothing burger. I remember watching like the first bit of Star Wars 7 and actually thinking, wait, Finn could be cool. And then just nothing happened with Finn ever. I don't know what the hell was that. And it was actually a cool character.
They don't want to alienate people in that group. So it's like, do you really believe in this, or are you just using this as a tool for marketing? And I think that really, whenever you see things like the Overwatch League going to Saudi Arabia and Overwatch esports going into the Middle East, it becomes very evident that Blizzard does not actually have any values outside of money. And I think that that's also another very big factor, is that you compare that with Square Enix, who is willing to, again, lose money for their values. And it's not even losing money for your values, it's losing money for the artistic integrity of your product. You have to fundamentally change your product in order to adhere to somebody else's social norms. So your art is not good enough to exist on its own. Now it has to be modified, altered, and fundamentally censored in order for it to meet a, in a lot of ways, a reductive cultural standard. Obviously, they can do things however they want, but, I don't necessarily agree with that. But again, if you're making games like this and you're selling them over there, I don't want to hear about how much you care about gay people. Like, just straight up. This is insane. And
I agree.
So these companies are using these different people as basically a tool for marketing. And
there's an old adage, an old saying, that basically says, practice what you preach. And I find that to be the one thing that has completely gone awry in our societies. People will preach things and yet practice something completely the opposite of the thing that they're preaching. And no one apparently cares. No one gives a shit when Blizzard preaches all of this inclusivity, all of this diversity, but then releases their game in China, removing all of the inclusivity and diversity. That is clearly you practicing the opposite of what you're preaching, which by definition makes you a what, chat? What are you when you say one thing and do another thing? We have a word for that. Hypocrite. You're a hypocrite. You're hypocritical. And yet for some reason, we don't seem to care. For some reason, most people don't seem to care. It's like, well, I don't care. There's this thing that's just recently happened. With Gina something. Some chick that used to work for Disney. What's her name? Man, the Star Wars thing. The Star Wars show. Gina Carano. That's the one. That's the one, right? I was seeing this story of where Gina Carano was approached by what's his name? The dude that played the main character. Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal approached Gina and said to her, just add to your bio #TransLivesMatter and they'll leave you alone. And now, obviously, everyone on the left is going, yeah, this bitch brought it on herself. She was warned. And I'm like, wait, do you guys realize how incredibly insulting that is? Pedro basically told her, it doesn't matter whether or not you believe this bullshit. Just put it in your bio so that you can shut them up. Like, you don't actually have to believe like trans people's lives matter. You just need to tell them that it matters. But everyone's sort of going, yeah, well, he warned her, so she shouldn't start crying about her losing her job. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, do you guys not hear this? Like, when I read that, I was like, whoa, I thought Pedro was, like, actually on the side of trans people and gay people. I genuinely thought he was, like, an ally to these people. But the way he told her, like, just add that to your bio, suggests that he doesn't give a shit. He's just adding that shit to his bio so they will leave him alone. So they'll think he cares about them. I did not take that as, like, the message that I took away from that wasn't a good one. Because, like, you should obviously think that human lives matter regardless of who the human is. Right? I don't think that any human being, whether they be trans, gay, black, white, doesn't matter. If you're a human being, you matter. And you should matter. And your life should matter. And if you're going to add something like trans lives matter, you better fucking believe that. Otherwise, you're just a hypocrite. Right? You are just a hypocrite. I don't know. People are weird, man.
And I want to address a concern that a lot of people might have, or a comment that a lot of people might have, is that it doesn't matter that they're doing this, because even whenever they provide this type of representation, it is still a net good. And I completely disagree with that. And I want to explain why I disagree with it. The reason why I disagree with it is because basically what ends up happening is you take a pure ideal, and I'm not saying pure as in terms of like completely good, but is pure in terms of it being untainted by any sort of outside entity, whether the ideal is capitalism, communism, gay rights, gun rights, anything like that. You take an idea that is a pure idea, and then what ends up happening is that this company tries to attach their brand to this idea, to use this idea as a marketing tool for their brand. If you've ever seen the way that parasites infect bugs, this is actually extremely similar. So they are effectively parasitic on these social issues because they are using these social issues as a tool for marketing. And in the process of that, they are polluting these social issues with their own brand problems. Because a lot of times the companies that are using these social issues as effectively marketing tools do not have pristine reputations. I think, again, Blizzard is the best example of this. So you have Blizzard, who's had multiple scandals, sexual, allegations, scandals, this like weird stuff, deleting the gay people from like the game in different parts of the world, and all of these other kinds of issues, not to mention issues that are inside of their own games that took them over 10 years to fix. These are all problems that have been going on for a long time. And so then whenever you see them doing this and you see this issue, I think that a lot of people take the issue less seriously, and the mental messaging of that is that this issue is not legitimate, and they are delegitimizing and making people skeptical of the issue because the company is attaching themselves to the issue, and people are actually skeptical of the company, and they become skeptical of the issue through basically, like logical cause and effect.
Well, the problem with hypocritical actors is exactly that, right? And I'll be honest with you, I genuinely believe that the overwhelming majority of gamers are probably some of the most accepting people you'll ever meet. I don't think a lot of gamers really give a shit about and how do I know this? Because the overwhelming majority of gamers don't even know who the other people are that's playing the video game. If you're playing a game, right? If you're playing World of Warcraft and you go into a dungeon and one of the other players happen to be trans, you don't even know that, right? It doesn't matter. If they're a good player, they're a good player, and it doesn't matter. You're just there to play a video game, right? You're not there because you give a shit about anything. I genuinely think I had this conversation with one of the people in my community who happens to be a trans girl. And she actually said she prefers dating gamers because they're a lot more open-minded than people who aren't gamers. And I was like, oh, why do you think that? And she was like, well, a lot of gamers are very much into weeaboo stuff, right? So very much into anime and stuff like that. And in anime, this shit is a lot more like openly sometimes put into the animes, and it's a lot more openly discussed. So a lot of gamers are a lot more open-minded about stuff like this happening. Where it starts to become a problem is when, and this is again where people suffer from lazy thinking. You have a studio that is all about, like X lives matter. And then the game comes out and it's absolutely dog shit. And then instead of the person going and actually sitting there and doing the research and breaking down the game and figuring out exactly why the game is dog shit, they just go, well, clearly X lives is what made my game dog shit, right? You understand what I'm saying? So the game is dog shit because the developers clearly only cared about the messaging of something rather than actually making a good game. And now players just lazily go, well, it's X lives that make this game shit, so X lives is the problem. I don't want X lives in my video games. Rather than realizing it's a lot bigger than just X lives, because X lives is not why your game is shit. It's actually, there's a lot more to it than X lives. X lives was literally just a tool. And this is what's sad, is that a lot of these communities, a lot of the marginalized communities, a lot of the minority communities are being used as tools by these large corporations, and the result of this usage is oftentimes an increase in hatred. Because most human beings suffer from lazy thinking. Most human beings suffer from like a very lazy way of thinking about stuff.
And I think that's why I find it to be so bad whenever these companies do this, and they do it in a cynical and self-serving and profit-driven way. I don't have a problem.
Can you remove Pringles' message there? Pringles, I realize that that is the actual name of a movie, but that's not going to fly with Twitch. So can you please remove that? I've not seen the movie. Yeah, Twitch is pretty weird about stuff like that, bro. So, thank you, Avanon. I appreciate that. No, it's fine. Pringles, I'm just saying, the last thing I want is to get into trouble with Twitch over you saying the name of a movie, but then I get into trouble because apparently the movie is a problem, and Twitch oftentimes doesn't understand context.
Problem with a company that wants to stand on business like Square Enix and say, hey, this is what we believe in, and we're willing to lose money on it. But in my opinion, whenever I see a company that has values that they will not or that they will compromise for money, well, then you don't really have values. You just more or less have different marketing tactics, don't you?
True.
And I think that's really the most cynical thing about it, is the fact that these different social issues, I think, for a lot of gamers, and I find it to be very disappointing to see it whenever I'm watching like a new trailer on my stream, and there's, oh my god, there's a fucking black person. Oh my god, there's a woman. And then I see my chat stream, and I'll read YouTube comments. It's not just my community, guys. There's a lot of people that think this.
True.
And everybody is spamming woke. They're like, oh, woke game, woke game.
Yeah, that happens. That happens a lot. Cook, how you doing, bro?
Oh, no, another girl protagonist, everything like this. And I think that all of this is contributed into a major problem, which is lack of trust of the developer on a fun...
No, well, yes, to some extent, but also because lazy thinking. Like, guys, I can't stress this enough. Humans are too busy. And again, I'm not blaming anyone here. I happen to be basically fucking jobless, right? Except for my shifts in the mines, obviously. The mines of Twitch. But outside of my shifts in the mines, I am completely, like, without a job, homeless, whatever the fuck, right? So, I have time to think about this stuff. I have time to really think critically about the stuff that is going on. The overwhelming majority of humans don't have that time. You wake up every morning at 6 a.m., you shower, have your breakfast, drive for an hour to your work, you work your ass off until 5 o'clock, 5:30, then you drive home for an hour, grab some dinner, play a couple of games of whatever, 2 or 3 hours, get into bed, sleep, and then this weekend, maybe you're going to the game, maybe, you know, you're having a barbecue, whatever, you're just trying to unwind. You don't have time to really dedicate to thinking through the fundamental problems or the fundamentality of a problem. So what happens is most humans just make a very quick judgment call. And that is, if enough games come out that, you know, girl boss games, and enough of those games suck, the average player goes, girl bosses suck. And then it's over. No matter what game you make, if there's a girl boss in the game, immediately the player goes, yep, girl boss, woke. Right? Because I am just making a connection as quickly as possible. And why do we do this? We do this to save time. Right? We want to save time because we're busy with other things. We have other things to consider. So it's much easier to just make a quick connection and go on with our lives, rather than having to really think through everything and think about it very carefully. So what these companies are doing is they're actively cultivating hate. They're actively cultivating the very hatred that they claim to be against. This is why I always say, don't listen to what someone tells you they want to do. Look at what they are doing, because that's far more important than what they say they want to do. Because companies will say all manner of bullshit. That doesn't matter, right? Presidents will say all manner of bullshit. That doesn't matter. What is what they're doing? What they're doing what happens with it? What is the cause and effect of the things that they're doing? If the cause is different to what they're saying, then it means that what they said isn't actually what they want. What happened is what they wanted to have happen. And in my opinion, most of these companies that are claiming to be all for diversity and inclusion actually want people to hate these minority groups, because that is the end result due to lazy thinking. Phil, how you doing, brother? I think it's also kind of a meme to spam woke as well at this point. Well, yeah, obviously, right? There is going to be people that will just spam it because, you know, why not? It is fun. It's a fun little interaction. But I do think that there's also, the problem is the reason it became a meme is because it's already so ingrained, right? It is so obvious to people that because of, you know, making that very quick connection between stuff. I'm half expecting that if there ever is another Tomb Raider, people will see Lara Croft and just instantly spam woke, even though, like, there is no Tomb Raider without Lara Croft.
Fundamental level.
Bro.
So, hopefully I've illustrated kind of like where these problems come from, whether it's coming from monetization, whether it's coming from communications, whether it's coming from game development, whether it's coming from the way that the companies address bugs. I think that there has been a massive disconnect between what the, like, I want to say American, but like really it's Western population wants as players, and what the studios are at least communicating to those players in terms of their messaging, in terms of the way that they develop games, and also in terms of like how they market these games. Because whenever these games are using these social issues to market themselves, and then just suddenly ignoring them in these other different parts of the world where the social issues aren't as popular, you can clearly see that the social issue is not something that the company actually holds value in. It's just, well, it is something the company holds value in, but that value is monetary and not idealistic or principle driven. And so I think that one thing that people have to keep in mind is that every single time that a company does that and they attach themselves to one of these issues, and people can clearly see that there are inconsistencies, or that they're doing this thing because they're trying to like make money, and they're not doing it, or, you know, like affording to lose money on it. This is something that I think will cause people to have a distrust or a dislike for the issue itself. And I think that we've seen that happen. Like, for example, whenever you see these games that come out and, you know, everybody says, oh my God, it's a woke game. A lot of cases, it's necessarily not a woke game, but it's just a game that has, like, you know, a female protagonist. But look at, for example...
Dude, I remember when we watched the cinematic for Cyberpunk 2077, there were people in chat spamming, oh my God, woke. There were people spamming woke in Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. I mean, if you've played Phantom Liberty, Reed is an absolute boss. They couldn't have chosen a better character or a better actor for Reed, right? The same with Somi. Absolute bosses as characters. But again, it is that sort of very quick judgment. I see a thing, I make a connection, and once that connection is established, once that neural pathway has been established, it is now set in stone. It's very difficult to change neural pathways. The brain creates connections between two neurons, and once that connection, once that pathway has been established, it's instant. That's where lazy thinking comes in, because it happens instantly. The brain instantly makes the connection. It makes the comparison. Bam, bam, done. I've compartmentalized that. I filed it. We now know what it is. We can move on to the next thing. Because Cyberpunk Universe is perfect for the woke people. It should be as mixed as possible. Dude, Cyberpunk, the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 is as loved as it is by gamers, after all of their, you know, after they sorted out all of their nonsense, is proof that gamers don't hate diversity and inclusion. The same with Baldur's Gate 3. It's proof that gamers don't hate diversity and inclusion. Because if gamers actually did, those games would not be selling as well as they are.
Example, Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is coming out. Now, obviously, the girl's really hot, and so it kind of doesn't fit that entirely. But it's very clear that people actually don't have a problem with female protagonists.
No.
But they do have a problem whenever it's a Western studio that's creating a certain type of female protagonist that feels like it is a, you know, critique on modern society. And I think that that's something that, in general, people become fatigued by. And as soon as people start seeing the man behind the machine, the willing suspension of disbelief is removed, and people see different things in the game as representations of real-life goals and real-life political, messaging, and then that sense of escapism that they get out of the games is removed. So I think that all of these things, again, contribute to a general distrust for Western developers on a wholesale level.
True.
And I think that we're seeing this happen in real time, and we've been seeing this happen in the last 5 years, and things have just deteriorated, and there's no reason for me to assume that things will stop deteriorating. Like, for example,
no, they won't.
Here's another small example that just occurred to me. Elden Ring had the body type A and body type B for men and women that a lot of games use now instead of using male and female. And nobody ever brought this up or cared about it, but whenever an American company has this, there's at least, I'd say probably 10 times more people talking about it. So, again, it's about...
I don't even notice things like that in games, to be fucking quite honest with you. As long as I have the choice in games where you clearly want to give me a character creator, I couldn't care less. You could literally call it Z and X body types. I couldn't give two shits. As long as I have the body type to choose, the broad outline of what I want to create, I couldn't care less, bro, what you want to call that shit. I don't even know why it's such a big problem that it's called man and woman, but if you don't want to call it man and woman, fucking fine. I don't care. It's there. I'm going to make although I may not be the right person to talk about this because I usually just hit the default button a couple of times and then decide based on, or the randomized button a couple of times. And then I see a character that kind of looks alright and I just log into the game. I don't spend an awful lot of time customizing my characters. These devs must realize that they basically sound like a vegan teacher preaching to the classroom about the benefits of meat-free diet, right? That's what it feels like to play most Western games to me. I don't care about their message, especially if they talk down to me. Jumbo, absolutely agree with you there. It was weird. It wasn't obvious what 1 and 2 meant. The bottom line for me is that everyone should be able to know what went into development as a game and then choose if they want to support it or not. Well, this is exactly where I think this Gamergate is coming from. And this is why it's so important that gamers don't stop fighting now. For the first time ever, we have the tools to fight back. And I know that it is so easy for gamers to go, well, I'm busy with other things. I don't give a shit about this. But even if you just, you see a post and you retweet that or you like the tweet, or we need to make ourselves heard here. We need to fight back. And the best way for us to fight back is using the one platform that as of yet isn't silencing us, right? That's the only way that we're going to make these developers feel it. And if you don't have Twitter and you don't want to have Twitter, that's perfectly fine. But then we need to start being principled. Do not support games that come from these super, super, super political companies. They come from these hypocrites. Don't buy their games. Stand back and say, until you do X, Y, and Z, I will not support you. It is as simple as that. And I realize it's far easier said than done, but it is important that we as gamers do that, again, to as much of a degree as we can.
People thinking that what they're seeing is not authentic. It's what people are seeing that's not real. It's not, what the artist wants it to be, and it's being created as a for-profit amalgamation of different goals, focus groups, and profit motives, and KPIs that this game is supposed to create, rather than just being a cohesive, experience that a person can go through.
Gypsy, how you doing? I think that's perfectly fine, right? But again, body type A and B, I wouldn't not buy a game just because it has body type A and B or body type 1 and 2, right? That's not enough for me. Because if the rest of the game is really good, I don't see that as the biggest problem. That's a really small thing. However, if the entire game just smacks of activism, that's usually where I go, yeah, okay, I can't deal with that. I'm not supporting this bullshit.
And so I wanted to make this video and talk about it because we're having a lot of conversations about woke things in video games, but I actually think that the woke things in video games in some cases is simply just perceived, and it's not always just woke if there's a girl or another minority in the game. And I think that Final Fantasy 16 proves that very clearly a lot of gamers actually do not believe that, but in fact people just don't trust Western studios with anything. And I think this even goes farther, and they don't trust Western games media with anything.
But you can't trust the games media?
I don't know what the solution to this is, to be honest with you.
I know. The system, this entire thing needs to be brought down. I just recently rewatched Law-Abiding Citizen. There's that moment where he says this whole damn thing is corrupt, and I'm gonna bring this entire corrupt citadel down upon your heads. That is the answer. It needs to be completely brought down. We need to get rid of games journalists. They're no longer required. They're a dying breed anyways. Who gives a shit about what some hack at IGN thinks? Let them rot for all I care. You have your YouTubers, you have your independent spaces where new things can pop in and new people can start things. There you have Ballilar, for example, with their website that's trying to become a media company within their own right. Support things like that, right? And if they become corrupt, stop supporting them. That's the only way this gets fixed.
I really don't, I'm not sure. I do wish that companies would stop using social issues to market themselves. And companies would stop making statements about social issues whenever the company isn't willing to lose money on the social issues. And also sometimes I think companies use support of social issues as a way to whitewash previous controversies, which I think not only seems extremely fake, but it also hurts the social issue because, again, it pollutes the social issue with the brand and the different, the reputation of that company. So I would really like to see that stop. And I think that nobody has a problem with a company that's willing to, have a real value and is willing to lose money on that value. But I think people are tired of seeing companies that clearly do not have these values, and they're just using them as tools for marketing. And I think that that's represented in terms of many things with gaming nowadays. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to make a video and talk about this. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Hopefully you guys can see where my perspective is. And I think that, again, the wokeness and people perceiving this in games is actually a small microcosm of a massive issue that's been growing and getting bigger over the last 10 years, I would say. Ever since,
I would argue it all started with the American university system. I am going to harp on the American university system because there's far too many people now that have degrees for things that do not require degrees. In fact, I'm about 90% done writing my universe for my game, right? I'm about 90% done. I've already spoken to 2 people that's gonna start working on the game with me. And my rule is I don't want anyone that has ever studied video game design at any university. I want people that actually just love video games and just wants to make video games. And if they have to learn on the job how to actually make a video game, then great. That's what we'll do. I don't give a shit about someone that studied because I don't need that activist mindset anywhere near my universe, because I can already tell you it is a dark one.
2016, 2018, somewhere around there. And I don't know how it's going to be fixed. I think that these Western development companies and Western publishers really need to think about how are we communicating with our audiences? What are we doing wrong? Why are so many people feeling this way in terms of day one issues or any of these different facets? And really try to communicate a more authentic and genuine experience to their customers and, more importantly, their fans. And so I wanted to make this video and talk about it because I don't really hear anybody else talking about this other than myself. And I wanted to sit here at 5 in the morning in my room, my dark room, and have a conversation about it. So I'd be curious to hear what you guys' thoughts are. And again, you know, I know people are very emotional about this, and people are very like high tension topic. Just try to be chill, right? I mean, I think that most people that are, you know, talking, and most people that you're even having conversations with, even if you're disagreeing with them, you probably actually agree on most things. It's just, in general, like either a miscommunication or, you know, just a disagreement. Like it's not really, it's not as big of a deal, I think, in a lot of cases as people make it out to be. And, you know, so try to keep it a little bit chill. People have been very emotionally elevated with this topic, and I personally find it exhausting to have to deal with people that are like that.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of this is just him saying goodbye. So, yeah, I think this is a very big W take from Asmongold. I like the perspectives that he gives in this video. And I do believe that, you know, even though I take this quite seriously, it doesn't impact my life, right? And I've been more than happy, even on Twitter, to have conversations. I've had conversations with some of the developers, right? I've had conversations with people that are detractors, because I genuinely believe the answer is to have dialogue, and the answer is to try and explain to people what they get wrong, rather than just screaming at people and telling people that they're idiots and they don't know what the fuck's going on, because that doesn't achieve anything. You're not actually going to make anyone change their minds if all you're trying to do is scream louder than the guy next to you. So I do think, yeah, very good message here. Novotic, by the way, 9 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Are we talking Grimdark? Yes. Yes, we are talking Grimdark. Yeah, it is dark. It's a very dark universe. It's also a very large one. It's a very, very big universe. And I think it's gonna be cool. At least I think so. The challenge, that will depend on which planet you're on. I'm obviously not going to go into details here about the universe because, well, I don't want anyone to watch the stream back and go, oh shit, that's a good idea. I'll make a game exactly about this. Eric, bye. So I have a couple of people already that I'm in talks with that's going to help design the game. But it's going to be more of like work on it behind, like, you know, in free time whenever you have time to work on it. And then we'll probably do some kind of profit share, like once the game goes live. So it'll be a profit share thing where we maybe go and say, right, 40% or 30% of the profits of the game is split among the 4 or 5 developers that worked on the game equally. So everyone gets an equal pay share of everything that we sell, and then 60 or 70% goes back into making the next game, but then also with an actual salary now for everyone that works on the game. Because I make decent money, but not enough to pay a lot of people a fucking salary, right? So yeah, I'm sort of talking to people who just have a passion for games, you know, have a passion for wanting to make a really cool game, but more importantly, want to start a universe. Because the universe I'm creating isn't a universe, it's not a one and done thing. Like the universe I've created, like I already have rudimentary ideas for about 4 different games that literally just happens on a single planet in this universe. And there's not just a single planet on this universe or in this universe. So there's a lot of space if this works out to eventually write books in, just go nuts in, right? That's my forte. That's what I do best. I'm not a great narrative writer, but I'm a good creative writer. So I'm very good at creative writing. I love sitting and thinking about the different political styles and the different, the interconnectedness of different societies and how the world is going to connect to different things. And, this is going to happen, but then this will happen, and this is how it's going to impact the world. But the actual, the nitty gritty stuff, I'm not that good with that. Not yet, at least. I'm still working on that. Number 3, in an art consultant asking for a friend. I probably do need someone that does narrative at some point. Maybe I should speak to Kiko. She's a writer. She's a ghostwriter. Maybe she'd be interested in getting in on that. Mr. Bongi, in terms of Blizzard, think of me as the creative director at Blizzard, not the narrative director at Blizzard. Right? Because the creative director at Blizzard is usually the guy that he sort of outlines the main storyline. We're going to start here and we're going to end here, and this is what the world is going to look like. But he's not the one that's writing the small little, the actual narrative that gets us there. Yeah, so kind of like Mason. I love doing that, and I spend way too many hours writing down all of my thoughts and all of my ideas and how I want the world to be. Linda, yeah, we can talk. If you guys are interested in that, reach out. Reach out, because it's something I genuinely want to do. The first game, however, is going to be a survival game. Because that's where the idea came from. The idea was sparked while playing survival games, and I was like, I have this phenomenal idea for what a survival game can be. And then as I started thinking about it more, I was like, wait, whoa. But what if this happens? And what if that happens? But then why would that happen? Okay, wait, that could happen because of this, and this. But then that would actually happen because of this, and this. And then before I knew it, there was a lot of this, and this. To boil the water before you drink it? No. If I am doing a survival game, it is going to be with taking all of the most annoying parts of a survival game and turning that shit off. Having ways for people not to have to deal with that. But I'll probably do a sort of optional thing. So maybe, for example, you can choose to do it manually, or you can choose to do it automatically depending on the kinds of devices that you build. Right? Or if you're going to have followers, depending on the followers that you want to incorporate into the game. But if you want to do it hardcore, actually boil the water your own, you can do that. But that's obviously going to be up to you. So I guess no necessary nap times. I mean, so the thing for me, the thing that I've been sort of because I play a ton of survival games, and the thing that usually drives me nuts in survival games is the unnecessary nitty-gritty micromanagement bullshit. That I understand the concept. So, for example, why is it that people constantly need to eat within a survival game? Well, because you want to give people a reason to constantly go out and forage for food, right? Because they need to be exploring the world. You built this entire world. They should be exploring it. But I personally believe that there are better ways to get people out into the world than just, oh, you'll die if you don't eat. I think there are better ways that you can get people out into the world. And I think this is where a lot of survival games fail, because a lot of survival games don't actually think about story in any way, shape, or form. So story is either completely neglected, or it's basically just, it's sort of roughly applied to the world and then it's left. Where I think you can really incorporate story and lore into providing players with that need to go out and explore. that need to go find the world around them and maybe go explore those forgotten caverns without just being like, oh, you need food, so go, right? Usually it has the opposite effect. You set up a farm and now you're bound to a location. But that's exactly it, right? That's where the development will come in, where you make one thing, you play test it, and you go, shit, this is actually not what we had in mind. This had a terrible effect that we didn't think about, or that we didn't think was supposed to happen. But what I would rather want to do is, if I'm gonna have food in my game, and I probably will, is that food needs to provide buffs, and that different buffs will be required for different kinds of encounters. So you're gonna have dungeons, you're gonna have raids even, and for different encounters, different food types will actually be super, super good. So some food types may actually be suppressing void energy. And yes, that is an actual thing in the world, so you kind of have to suppress void energy. And that's going to be super good on, say, for example, void bosses, because they will be attributing to void energy themselves in a specific room, and the last thing you need is fighting this giant boss and suddenly a bunch of void creatures jumping out, and now you're fighting 20 giant bosses, right? Or maybe 2 giant bosses and a shit ton of ads, because all of your shit that you were doing was literally making the void state unstable, and now the boss made the void state unstable, and now the entire place is unstable. And then obviously creating counterplay for that. So maybe that is an achievement, or that's the hard mode, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it's sort of thoughts that I have, but again, this is going to be something that I'll allow people to explore. Like the developers that ultimately end up working on the project, I'll allow them to explore from their perspective how they think things should be playing out. Maybe survival of your castle instead? Can you find Mithril? Maybe we can put that in the game. The thing is, I am convinced that a lot of people make games with large ideas, which oftentimes then lead to very lazy implementation of the small ideas. And I think it's the small ideas that usually kill games far more than the large ideas do. So you have this grand narrative, this grand idea of where you want to go, but players rarely, if ever, get there because the small things annoy the living crap out of them. And there are so many survival games like that where eventually, I'll give you guys a great example of this. Dynasty, Medieval Dynasty. Have any of you ever played Medieval Dynasty or Dynasty? They have this concept in the game that is the bag, right? And they have the same as everyone else, this encumbered system, right? The problem with their encumbered system is you can have like 5 logs. Then you're encumbered in the beginning of the game. And most of the buildings that you build require a shit ton of logs. So you're basically farming, like you're cutting down 2 trees, picking up the wood, slowly making your way to the building that you're supposed to be building, handing in the wood, then running back, chopping down through. Like, that's literally the early gameplay. It is annoying as shit. So what I did was I literally just turned it off. So I have no backspace problems. I can have as many logs as I want. And I had a ton more fun in the game. Like, just not having an encumbered system made the game 100 times more fun for me. Because I want to build stuff and I want to continue the story. I don't want to, like, slowly walk from one tree to another because it's nuts, right? I hate that shit. Princess, I'm assuming if you play on easy, you don't have bag restrictions? Or if you do, it's very rare. Like, you have a massive bag or a massive amount of stuff that you can carry? Ivangar, how you doing, bro? Immigrant, but that's exactly it, right? So yes, Nightingale has a couple of really good ideas, but then also a couple of really lazy ideas. Lenley, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I've got things sort of sorted. But thank you so much. So yeah, the thing is, I think the way to make really good games is to play games. I think that's how you make really good games. All of the base developers from years ago, the people that made the companies that today are fucking all of us, were people who were just super gamers. They loved playing video games. And what they made was a game that they wanted to play. Right? They didn't have, like, it wasn't game by community or game by Congress. They didn't have a bunch of people sitting around a room thinking about what is the game that's going to sell the best. They were sitting around a table in a room thinking about, what is it that I want to play? Like, what do I like playing? And I want to make that, not because I care about what other people want. I want to play this. And then hopefully there are other people that want to play this too. Right? That's how I think you make good games. Because when you listen, like, there was this retroactive about World of Warcraft. And they literally spoke to the developers when they made World of Warcraft. And they asked them, like, why? And they were like, well, we were really into MMOs. And we were thinking, like, some of these MMOs have some problems. So let's make our own MMO the way that we want to play it. Like, at no point did they do market research. Nowadays, all of these AAA studios have market researchers that go out and send surveys out, all of these Blizzard surveys, that ask the players, what would you like to play? And if you are playing a survival game, how would you like that survival game to be played? Do you want 1 bag, 2 bags, encumbrance, no encumbrance? What do you want? So that they can take all of that data to the developers, and then the developers can make a game based on data. Good games, in my opinion, are not made based on data. It's made by gamers. It's made by someone that wants to make a game because they have an idea of something that they want to play. And they make that thing that they want to play, and hopefully other people want to play it too. World of Darkness. Vampire the Masquerade is one part of it. There is a setting called Mage, casting spells there harder the more people are in area, since they have their own concept of reality, which they subconsciously enforce. That's an interesting concept, Mr. Bongi. Funnily enough, Princess, I happen to prefer bags that are simply restrictive in how much items you can put in them. Like, I far prefer that to encumbrance. I hate encumbrance. I can't stand encumbrance. Like, there's nothing worse to me than suddenly you can't walk, or suddenly you can't fast travel because you have too many items. It's like, bro, come on. Are you for real right now? Like, I can't... What? This is nuts. Digit, how you doing, brother? But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It might happen that my first game is an absolute dumpster fire, in which case I've learned lessons, and you know, we'll implement those lessons and go from there. You're not gonna know until you do it. And I've wanted to make video games my entire life, bro. Like, I think I was 11 years old or something when I told my dad I want to make a video game. My dad was like, just go to school, become a lawyer, enough of this bullshit. Then I went to school, studied to be an actor, and I became a YouTuber. Do some on-stream, in-game dev section. I don't think I'm good enough to be in the dev section. Alexa, how you doing? Big face bin. But yeah, you know, I fell in love with stories. I think that's what gaming did for me. Stories to me is everything. Because I think stories is the most fundamental part of being a human. Without stories, we aren't human. What are you talking about today? I was just telling people about my idea for a game. Caleb, I think if I followed my dad's advice, I'd be a lot richer, though. I would probably be, like, lawyers in South Africa make a ton of money. And I would have been a good lawyer. Like, every single one of my professors in drama school said, bro, you should have become a lawyer instead. Because I like arguing, I like debating, and I like following arguments, right? So I like following your argument and trying to see if I can convince you based on logical inconsistencies within your argument. And I find the law super interesting. I mean, I, for fun, enrolled in online university, or we have this, the biggest university in South Africa is remote study. So you don't have an actual university. They send you all of the material and you study at home. I, for fun, just enrolled in law year 1. And I just read the Constitution of South Africa as well as the law of South Africa for funsies because I found it interesting. You know, I'm sure a lot has changed since then, but I did do that. You can help me with hosting my tomorrow's role-playing event. It's Void themed, and I'm looking for some ideas about mind games. What do you mean, some ideas about mind games? It's the vibe. Yeah, I think the only... I mean, fuck it. You know, I decided not to go study that because I prefer playing video games. I'll tell you, let me grab my food. All right, Lexel. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I just think one of the biggest problems in modern day video games is the fact that all of our games now are made basically by data scientists that go around asking the market what they want to play and how they want to play it, and then giving all of that data to the developer, and then the developer just puts something together that fits all of these data points. And I just always think to myself, I feel like you're trusting a system that is fundamentally broken. Because how many people actually fill out a survey really putting some thought and effort into it? Like, I don't. Do you? Like, do you actually fill out surveys really thinking about your fucking answers? Or do you just, if you can be asked, just sort of tick whatever? Plus, the problem with most players and with most people is that you'll feel different every day of the week. Like, your answers on Monday is probably not going to be the same as your answers on Tuesday, because on Tuesday, you're interested in something different than what you were on Monday. So fundamentally, you're already making the game from a completely different or from a completely wrong perspective. Spartan, you can write it here if you want. Welcome back, Lexel. Well, we ask ourselves, why is Classic so incredibly successful, and why is retail not? Spartan, okay, I'll do it now. Just give me a second here. So basically, I'm running a WoW RP campaign about my guild chasing a Void Elf that is one of Xal'atath's lieutenants. Tomorrow, we encounter her for the first time, and she uses mind games on us. There's a couple of interesting puzzle simulators online that you can try. Or you could just look up. See, the problem is what kind of mind games? Is she sending you through mazes? Is she simply playing word games? I would argue maybe go look for really difficult word games, and then add something like if you get it wrong, you die, right? So add a death component to it. So maybe you have 3 guesses. At the 3rd one, you all die. That could be an interesting one. And then make it like make it hard, but not like super hard, right? But maybe, you know, change the wording a little to fit into that. That could probably be fun. The mind game, I would need a lot more time if I'm gonna like create it from scratch. I know there are like a lot of quizzes online that have things like that, right? Riddles and stuff of that nature. Well, Alexa will be safe, but her knights will be teleported to a void realm, and they will need to solve riddles to get out of that void realm. So I've been trying to come up with morally challenging riddles. Okay. You could design... So wait, morally challenging. Immediately jumping out to me would be Arthas and his horse. The campaign that we had during, I think it was 10.2 or 10. Yeah, I think it was 10.2. Or maybe 10.15 or 10.16. One of the 10.17. One of those had the one with Arthas's horse, where you could either move the rocks or put the rocks back in. So Arthas Invincible broke his legs and Arthas had to kill him, which led to Arthas actually... That was the first moment that Arthas sort of went on the road to becoming the Lich King. You could have a choice there, and that choice ultimately will lead to certain consequences, so create 2 morally distinct consequences. But then don't have... My advice to you would be, do not have any of the consequences to the riddles be the wrong consequence. Instead, make it so that every choice has some upside, but also some downside, and their choice will determine what upside and what downside. So basically like a buff and a debuff. No matter what they choose, they get a buff and a debuff, but the debuffs and the buffs are different. Because those are oftentimes the most fun choices in word games. Or in games where you have these riddles, is where there's no obvious right or wrong. It's more just a case of you're either gonna screw yourself hard in the rest of the game, or you're gonna screw yourself a little for the rest of the game. Right? So you have to kind of make a decision, and the decision is gonna have consequences, but the decision isn't right or wrong. Because you are dealing with morality. And since everyone's application of morality is somewhat different, and you don't want to insert yourself too much in this, you don't want to make it so that they make one choice die and then they have to start over, this is probably the most fun way of doing it. Now, Spartan, I am all yours, my friend. I will not get into another topic of conversation until you've written to me your problems with my video. Go. We're all waiting on you now, fam. This is a problem and more a different idea. My friends and I use the dropping of the keys to see where we stand. All right. So is that why you think the dropping of the keys is a good idea? Epic Lulu, I don't think I would do that. I don't think I would do that. Let's just speak little copium. Let's not. So here's the thing. The problem with almost everything in video games is that all enjoyment of video games is subjective. There really is no such thing as a universally good or universally bad game. Even super bad games have somewhat of a niche audience. Like, it genuinely doesn't matter how bad a game is, there is guaranteed some kind of niche audience for that game, right? So clearly, all enjoyment is subjective. You can't really judge enjoyment on an objective scale. The best you can do is judge enjoyment for a majority of people. So if a choice really impacts the majority and has little to no effect on the minority, that is either a very good choice or a bad choice, depending on the impact that it has on the majority versus the minority, right? So if we have a plus 20 and lose to the timer, but beat the timer for plus 19, we can go, okay, we know where we are at skill-wise. Then we can go to the videos we make to see where we messed up. But you could do that even if your key didn't drop. If you failed the plus 20, you know you're not good enough to do the plus 20. And then you can literally just assume that you would probably be able to do it on the plus 19 or the plus 18 or the plus 17. It doesn't matter. Not to mention, I could fix that in one foul swoop. Just add an NPC where people can literally downgrade their own key if they feel like the key that they're on right now is a little bit too high. Right? So if someone feels like they maybe need a little bit more gear to get to say the plus 10 key rather than the plus 9 key, that they can drop it down to say a plus 8 by going to an NPC, maybe spending a bit of gold, dropping it down to a plus 8 and then going in again, right? So you could fix that specific problem purely by having an NPC, or better yet, just have that on the Mythic Plus dungeon. So you know where you put in your keystone? Make it so that when you place your keystone in, it gives you, say, for example, the maximum is a plus 8. So this is a plus 8 keystone. But you can downgrade it there. You can't upgrade it. So in order to get to plus 9, you will have to complete this plus 8. But you can downgrade. So in the Mythic Plus, you can go, dudes, this was way too hard. Let's just quickly downgrade this to a plus 8 or a plus 7. The reason I don't like the automatic downgrade of the key is it feels like an over punishment, right? You're punishing me way harder than what I think I deserve to be punished for failing this key. Because I'm first and foremost not getting the gear from this, right? So I've wasted a lot of time doing this thing. So first and foremost, I've wasted time. I've also not gotten any real rewards from this thing. And now I have to do it again on a lower difficulty, wasting even more of my time, only to do it on the difficulty that I wanted to do it on in the first place. So this becomes like a super punishment. And the reason I dislike this is it increases toxicity within the game. For example, when you play League of Legends, just normal matches, unranked, most people aren't toxic. And I'm being genuinely serious. When you play ARAMs, you very rarely interact with toxic people. There are always one or two, but it's actually, for the most part, a really fun experience. When you play normal League of Legends games, there's very little toxicity. It's once you go into ranked that the toxicity is high. And the reason for it is, at a certain level, losing becomes very punishing, like super punishing, because you eventually lose more LP than what you gain on a win. So one loss, you need to win twice in order to make it back. That's at least how it used to be. I don't know if it's been balanced since then. But so clearly, if someone starts to run it down in the game, or just, sending it, that is going to trigger the fuck out of you, because this may be your promotion match. Right? You're on your fifth game out of 5 to promote, and now this asshole is running it down. And you're just like, dude, I'm going to have to start from scratch. This is bullshit. So when you have massive punishments in video games with literally zero counterplay, especially in games where you are reliant on other people to also be doing their jobs, it is almost always going to increase toxicity. Because you're not just wasting your time, you are also wasting my time. And now I am going to be toxic because no one likes to have their time wasted. Al Silver, but that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? It's that I can do everything correctly in my key, then we fail on the first boss and the guy leaves the dungeon, and now my entire key is wasted. I have to, literally start again. But from a lower key, right? It feels terrible. Because I didn't do anything wrong, and yet I'm being punished like fucking crazy for something I didn't do. It's different if you're talking about, a single-player solo experience. There you can have punishment as much as you want, because all failures is your mistake. You're the reason you failed there. But whenever you have a game where other people can fail on your behalf, the second the punishments outweigh the positives, you're almost always going to end up with super toxicity. And then it doesn't matter if the developers crack down on toxicity, because even someone that is, generally speaking, not that toxic may have a very toxic moment because they just happen to have an off day, right? But it's not where it is a wait, it is point? Does it exist with League? Kev, I don't understand that sentence at all. Dying is the punishment. Z Vengeance. Are we talking single player games, or are we talking multiplayer games or MMOs? Because again, the reason you want to have a punishment is because you want there to be stakes. Without stakes, people tend to take things less seriously if there aren't any stakes. So you want to have some kind of punishment so that people feel like there is an actual stake. Okay? And there's actually stuff to lose here. But since in specifically World of Warcraft now, when we're talking about Mythic Plus, when you fail your key, you don't get gear, that is already a punishment right there. And that could just be the only punishment. You don't need to have excess punishments on top of that. I've already lost out on my gear. I already have to do this again. You punishing me more just really feels bad. You're just making me feel bad. Roaming Firebat, take care of yourself, bro. Thank you so much for hanging out on our off day. Really appreciate you. WoW is one of the few games out there that has trained its player base that for every possible game, there has to be punishment or something taken away. I would say it's not just WoW, but yes, WoW has done this to a large extent, especially in Mythic Plus. Especially in Mythic Plus. So again, you see, that's another example of just, if that happens 2 or 3 times in one day, you can imagine someone getting super triggered and then just being a toxic asshole, even if they're not, generally speaking, an asshole, right? Generally speaking, they might be a super nice person, but this one thing has now made them just really angry. You have to, if you could teach your players, if it was possible to teach your players it, it's also possible to unteach your players that. But there needs to be that political will almost from the developers to want to unteach that. And my issue is that it's not even that the players, because here's the thing. You may say, well, the players are, conditioned to be okay with it. But are any of those conditioned players actually going to complain if Blizzard announced tomorrow that they're removing it? No, they're not going to complain. They're going to be fine with it. And maybe you'll get a bunch of, elitists that go, oh, yeah, Blizzard just catering to all the casuals now. But they'll still play. They won't give a shit. And within a couple of years, they'll be fine. The problem that I have is that seems to be just a fundamental thing that's sort of baked into the WoW developer base. They refuse to make games that doesn't punish their player base. Spartan, I don't think you could create anything in any game that will not potentially have downsides, right? That will not potentially have problems. That's just the nature of people, because something might be really good for you and another person really hates that one thing. The like I said, all games are super subjective. Enjoyment is super subjective. The best thing you can do is to try and make a game as enjoyable for most people, and so that whatever the downsides are, they're spread out enough that people can cope with it, that people can be fine with it. Exile, I did not enjoy Shadowlands Dungeons. I thought Shadowlands Dungeons had interesting concepts, but as far as dungeons go, I found them to be very bad. Like, very annoying. Just the systems for Mythic Plus? I mean, the community itself? The community of World of Warcraft. It's a fun community. It is a fun community. Not gonna lie. Cata dungeons were, yeah. Actually, yeah. I loved Cataclysm dungeons. Of course, there were a lot of people that hated them. I love them because for the first time ever, we had these super difficult dungeons that you actually really did require everyone to work together. And it wasn't done by some silly, gimmick. It was literally just that the mobs fully required the utilization of all class abilities. And that was super fun because I remember running into my very first Cataclysm dungeon, and it was the one where you had to fly over and kill all of the mobs with the dragons. Or at least get them as low as possible. I don't know if you guys remember that. What was it called again? It was a Blackrock something. It's the one where you had to... Grumbatol. That's the one. Yes, thank you. Grumbatol. In Grumbatol, that was the first ever Mythic Plus I ran. Oh, not Mythic Plus. The first ever dungeon I ran in Cataclysm. And I remember we pulled the first pack like you do, right? Because why not? You're just pulling the pack. That's what dungeons do. You pull the pack. And we got wiped. And we were like, what the fuck? How? How did we get wiped here? And we pulled again, and we wiped again. And the tank was just absolutely getting blasted. Like, just ass blasted by these casters. And so we eventually me and my friends sort of went, okay, wait. What if I feared this one, you stunned this one, and we kept these two locked up. Let's see how it goes. And we survived it. And we're like, okay, so clearly we're going to have to sort of keep that in mind as we're going. Oh, that was fun. The dragons and spam mobs below. Yeah. Try to kill or get them as low as possible so the fights could be easy enough for it. That was a fun experience all around. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go watch League of Legends now. All right? I appreciate all of you for coming out on our off day. The mines were closed, but I opened them for a little while so we could hang out and shoot the shit for a bit. But now I'm going to go watch League of Legends, probably make some dinner in a bit, and enjoy my Saturday. I may open the mines again tomorrow. We'll see. I don't have any official plans for the mines to be open tomorrow. They will only officially open on Monday. But you never know. I may decide tomorrow I'm again interested in, coming to the mines a bit. Black Waltz, I really appreciate you still coming in and hanging out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you so much for spending your day with me. It's been my absolute pleasure to be the one to have been able to entertain you. And as always, be kind to each other, be good to each other. And I will see all of you in the next one.